everyone, welcome back to the old switcheroo where we're talking gaming retro with Mike and Jaymo.
I'm Mike.
And I'm Jaymo. Play along on our epic quest to research and review all 250 plus games in the Nintendo Switch Online retro catalog. Today we're running and gunning through two shining gems of the shooter genre, Gunstar Heroes on the Sega Genesis and Sin and Punishment on the Nintendo 64 in an episode we are calling Treizure Warning. And Mike, speaking of treasures, I think you have a special guest to welcome today.
Yeah, so this time we're bringing yet another person over from the Arcadiology podcast. Last time we had Jordan for Star Fox. This time we're bringing over Brad. So, Brad, if you'd like to explain Arcadiology, what you guys are up to over there.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. First of all, just looking forward to this. Should be pretty fun. But Arcadiology, we cover arcade games. Every 2 weeks we drop a new episode. The four of us, there's me, my two older brothers, and our friend Jordan. We play different arcade games and play them through the full way. We each take turns to, like, it'll be my pick, and then Jordan will go. And we kind of cycle it out and cycle in big games. We try to find, like, hidden gems or stuff that people haven't really played before, stuff we've never even heard of. So we've been finding a lot of games doing that, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. But yeah, we do a little bit of friendly competition on it too, see who can do it in the least amount of credits and stuff like that. But yeah, we're having a lot of fun doing that.
It's a fun listen. You invited Mike into your hallowed walls for the episode 13.
Yeah.
Joe and Mac returns, and you guys are kind of high on it. But I've noticed in the your more recent episode, The Punisher, you're like, well, it's got to be better than Joe and Mac, and I'm like, oh, that thing's fallen out of grace over time.
Yeah, I think me and Jordan, or I don't know if Jordan is. I'm still pretty high on that one. I don't know if everyone else is really holding up on it. I don't know what happened. But during the discussion, I felt like Mike was there. He was a witness. I feel like everyone was kind of giving it pretty decent ratings, decent ranking and everything, because every game we play, we rank it. So it just only games that we've played for the podcast are on the list. So I mean, the list is a little wild sometimes. There's some crazy games on there that people wouldn't expect to be on our list, but it's only because it's the games we've played. But I don't know. I think Joe and Mac is pretty decent. The movement and everything. It was a pretty fun game. I had a good time on it.
And are you guys stoked for the Capcom Fighting Collection? You think it's gonna? How'd you put it? Whack your bush? Think it's gonna?
Yeah, that game might whack your bush. So
It's a bushwhacker reference, everyone. It's a weird Punisher villain who has like a weird fleshy gun. I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't know too much about the Punisher, so whenever we came across that boss, someone got a chuckle out of me for sure. But yeah, the Capcom Fighting Collection in general, I'm not too big on fighting games. I don't have any problem with them. I just never really got good at them or anything. They're fun to dabble around with, so I'll probably check it out. But yeah, that Punisher game's on there, so that's the first time that game's been released in a long time. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm stoked for it. So, guys, are you ready to blast into today's games?
Yep.
All right. Well, then let's begin with Gunstar Heroes, released for the Sega Genesis in 1993. According to Nintendo Switch Online, a smash hit run and gun made by Treizure, a group of talented industry veterans. Two Gunstars armed with 10 different weapons must collect 4 mythic stones to thwart an evil empire's plot to resurrect a god of destruction. So this game had a simultaneous worldwide release in September of 1993. So let's compare the Japanese box art to the North American box art. The Japanese version, you have the protagonists kind of drawn in sort of 90s anime style with the antagonists kind of surrounding them. And then you have a kind of a similar concept, a bit more dynamic for the North American release. You have Gunstar Red and Gunstar Blue kind of fleeing the evil empire as they're shooting behind them and being chased. Brad, do you have any kind of feelings about these covers?
I like the Japanese one. I like that anime style. I think that looks pretty cool, almost like comic booky a little bit. And just the style of it, and has like a lot of the bosses on there from the game. Just that one looks a little cooler to me. The other one looks decent, but almost looks like, I don't know, like the 3D looking graphics. I don't think it looks as well as the Japanese one.
Yeah. Mike, what's your take?
Yeah, I think about the same. Is the American cover really only has one villain or one like full scale villain kind of in the background.
Yeah, that's Orange, one of the bosses.
I like the way that the Japanese cover kind of just has them surrounded by it. if for other reason, it kind of feels like it fits the feeling of this game, which is just this game has so many villains that just kind of keep coming. And so I think I like that. And I also like that one of the villains that shows up on there is officially Colonel Red, and is unofficially, and I think it's the same comment I made when playing this. The speedrunner community also just refers to him as M. Bison.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what he looks like.
Is that what he plays like? He has a Psycho Crusher attack.
I don't have as good a feel as what he plays like, but it was definitely like that's what this looks like. To the point that I went and checked.
Oh, to see if it was him.
Just that, okay, this came out after that. This isn't like a coincidence. Like, this does not feel coincidence.
Right.
But I checked because every so often it's like, oh, this has to be ripping this off. It's like, oh, this came first. Huh. So it's like, I better check. It's like, nope, this is a couple years after. So it's like, this feels like it's exactly what they're going for.
I mean, in fairness, M. Bison was a knockoff the Nazis. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's not like they invented that uniform, but definitely the redness and like the kind of Psycho Crushery.
The redness is kind of the key part of that in my mind.
Isn't it both Capcom?
No, this
No.
is Treizure, and Street Fighter was Capcom.
Oh, that's right. Okay. All right.
But kind of similar aesthetics in the two companies, very colorful, very sort of anime-esque. One thing I like about the North American box art, and I always liked about it, is that it's more representative of the gameplay. In the Japanese one, they're not even really firing their guns. Although it's cool, you can see what kind of ammunition they have. They thought to draw in that little detail on the chamber of each of their guns. And so I was like, that's neat. That's like, directly from the game. But with Red running one direction and shooting behind him, like that felt very like reminiscent of the sort of bullet hell sort of frenetic movement of this game. And yeah, I don't know. I like them both.
I do think the description was actually wrong because I think it said that they have 10 weapons.
That was 8. No. Wait, continue.
I thought the description said 10 weapons, and they just have 10 super weapons because you can use each of the, since the way this handles the weapons is the 4 different power ups, and you can use them on their own, or you can combine them with a second power up. So you actually, I think, should have 14 options, 10 super weapons, and 4 if you actually choose to use the weapon on its own.
Yeah, but who would do that? What sociopath is not using the super weapon every time? Like...
I've had a couple moments. I feel like some of them, I mean, I guess we'll get into that later, but some of them seem stronger on their own than when it's combined.
Oh, I think this game might be deeper than I realized. Well, so let's get into some trivia for the game. As you might have surmised by the title of our episode here, both games today were developed by Treizure. This game studio was founded when producer Masato Maegawa and a handful of his co-workers left Konami Studios, frustrated by that company's reliance on sequels and existing IP, such as Castlevania and the Ninja Turtles. Maegawa and his team approached Sega with their concept for Gunstar Heroes, but were rejected because they lacked a proven track record. Sega did, however, contract them to make McDonald's Treasure Land Adventure. And when executives were impressed by their progress, they decided to greenlight both games, with Gunstar ultimately being released first. And this is all according to a translated Masterpiece Album interview on Sega's Japanese website. Did either of you guys ever play McDonald's Treasure Land Adventure?
I never even heard of that one.
Is it called Treasure Land because they were treasure, or or are they called Treasure because this was Treasure Land? I didn't have a good company name before that.
I think they are being cheeky.
Okay.
Like with the title. Yeah. My distinct memory of this is that we've talked about before on the podcast, but like Burger King in the 90s would have Sega Genesis, kiosks. And I remember one time McDonald's Treasure Land Adventure was playing at Burger King. Like, I hope someone got fired for that blunder. Like, come on. The company, as we said, developed by Treizure, was interesting in that Maegawa had to lobby Sega to allow them to include their company logo at the start of the game. At the time, this was actually considered quite rare, and that small concession, video game historians believe is why Treizure has kind of a bigger footprint in the 16-bit history books as far as most people are concerned. Because a lot of games at this time were not having the individual development company logo popping up, which I thought was neat. And as shown in concept art from the PlayStation 2 re-release, this game had the working title Blade Gunner, which was dropped out of fear of litigation from Warner Brothers, and Lunatic Gunstar, which was meant to convey the game's hectic nature, but ultimately was deemed too negative in connotation. I don't know. I kind of like Lunatic Gunstar better than Gunstar Heroes. What do you guys think?
I don't know if it's just a nostalgia thing, just have the name in my head, but I feel like Gunstar Heroes fits better just because that's what I'm used to. So outside of that, I can't really say. I don't know.
I mean, Gunstar Heroes feels like it fits the plot better.
I guess so. I just love the word lunatic. I think like, I think I'm just too pro lunatic. So before we get into the joy pros and joy cons of Gunstar Heroes, how far did we each get? So Brad, what's your history with this game and how far have you gotten in it?
I mean, the first time I actually played this game myself was like 3 years ago. Played on emulator. I knew my older brother Sky from the Arcadiology podcast, but he used to play this game when we were kids. I don't think I ever actually played it. I never watched him play it, but no, I don't have any memories of actually playing it myself. So just the visuals and looking at it kind of brings me back to there. Remember some of the stuff, but as far as actually finishing the game, I did finish it. I tried for a while to like see how far I could get without dying. I got pretty far. I think we're gonna talk about that later, maybe. But yeah, I got decently far without dying, and I ended up beating it. I did it without any save states because I was determined to do it because it's a little bit generous with the checkpoint. So if you die, it hits you back a little bit, but it's not too brutal on most of the stages. There's one in particular that's a little rough, but other than that, it wasn't a super hard game until like the second half. So yeah, I wanted to see it through, and I did end up finishing it.
You Nintendo did.
Nintendo.
Family computer.
Nice work. You guys, listening to your podcast, like, and then you guys like, oh yeah, I spent like 6 quarters. And I'm like, what? Like, you like beat Metal Slug in like 2 quarters or something. You guys have got some gaming chops over there. I listen, I'm like, wow, they're really good at video games. So was Mike, I think, right? How'd you do on this one?
I mean, I feel like it's worth noting that I know that I selected easy on this one, and I suspect that Brad may have been on the higher difficulty.
I actually don't know. I didn't even realize there was a difficulty setting. Whatever it defaults to is what I would have played.
Normal.
Okay.
But I did eventually beat this.
Nintendo.
Family computer.
Excellent. And I'm a cheater. Like, you guys are like, oh, for the dignity of the game, I don't want to use save state. No, I rewound a lot. I do think I accomplished some things you guys probably didn't, I'm guessing. But like I said, we'll get to that. But Nintendo did beat this game.
Nintendo.
Family computer.
I will say to this game's credit, infinite continues is a wonderful thing in a game, so that helps. Actually, I think it's probably the same thing that helps with a lot of the arcade games where it's like, they weren't going to be like, you've given us too many quarters, now leave. Like, there is something that you can kind of push through in a way that if you had to start back over, it's like, okay, I'm not beating this game.
Yeah, that's what was weird when I downloaded the Castlevania arcade for our Castlevania episode, and like you would put in quarters and they'd still send you back to the start of the level. I'm like, that's not how arcade games work. Like, come on. You're supposed to pick up right where you left off for your money. And I can't believe this game, didn't have an arcade release. Like, it almost feels like it was a port of an arcade game until you start taking a closer look at it. But so Brad, you want to start us off on the discussion here of the joy pros of Gunstar Heroes? What do you like about it?
I really enjoyed all the different weapon combinations. It was pretty fun just like messing around with them. I mean, I think there was, for me, a clear winner. What I actually wanted to use, there was one that has a pretty much a homing, and then you have like a lightning, like a laser beam, and it just kind of tags everything on the screen. You kind of just hold it in and run across. That made it a little bit easy, but there's still a lot of different variety, just kind of messing around with the different combinations. There's tons of bosses, which in general in games, I like boss fights. So that was definitely a pretty big one for me. And are we moving right into the cons too, or just pros for now?
We'll keep it positive at first. I got a lot of things I like about it.
Sounds good.
Your secret sauce of chaser plus lightning ammunition. So like as Mike alluded to, there's 4 main types of ammunition, but each combination will produce a different effect, and you can even double up on one you really like. So now your flamethrower is like bigger, longer, and does more damage. But the lightning chaser, it's well known that it makes the game much easier. And in fact, the lead developer was teased by how often he used this weapon. And so in Treizure offices, it was dubbed Boss Laser. But it was like kind of like, a sort of a backhanded compliment sort of thing. Oh, this is the one the boss has to use because he sucks so much.
Ironically, I don't think it's good for the bosses. I didn't really. Yeah, it was pretty weak. So you had to use something else to actually fight the bosses in the game.
They're not like corporate boss, but that is funny. That's a layer of irony I hadn't really considered.
I don't think I even used that one much.
Yeah, so playing through this, at first I was like, yeah, God, I have the homing weapon. So I played through the whole game with just homing and force shots and just I was just more focused on my movement and just let the homing do its thing. But it wasn't until I was trying to get the high score to compete with Brad, and I'm getting a bad feeling. I feel like he stomped me, but I realized the value of the ammunition that you actually have to manually aim. They're so much more powerful. I didn't realize just how much more powerful they were until I went through. So my favorite combination is lightning and flame, because it creates like your gun into like a lightsaber almost. It's this laser that goes out like 2 feet in front of you, and you can just kind of circle it around your body and swing it, and it does a crazy amount.
I mean, you know what they call that combination in the game, right?
I do not.
That is the lightning saber.
Nice.
That's a fun little tidbit you got from reading the manual.
Yeah, it does add to the weirdness that they're like, well, we needed to break away from like established IP, and it's like, but we're gonna go with the Blade Runner name reference, and then just have a lightsaber.
A lightning saber. And then when you defeat the bosses, they'll fly away like Team Rocket. But so, do you have a favorite combination, Mike?
I think that might have been what it was. I was using a lot of that, and also the lightning with more lightning.
Yeah, which is like a super laser, right?
Yeah, the Mega Bolt, in part because I think that passes through enemies.
Oh, I was not aware of that.
Usually, I think I was working with lightning just in general, so that it was a lot of damage output in one direction.
Working with lightning feels like it's like a subtitle or something like that.
The Nikola Tesla story.
There you go. I dig the levels. I like that you can select the first four, and I like how different each one feels. I kind of just want to go through them because there's not that many. So level one, the player battles their way through this open field, and they have to climb this pyramid and fight a boss on top of it, and then they do this really dramatic slide down back the other side, and then you fight this sort of enemy mech in this village built into the canopy of a lush forest. I think it's pretty cool. What do you think, Brad?
Oh yeah, the stage variety was pretty nice. How you said you can pick the different ones. It almost gave me like a Mega Man vibe, this game, a little bit. Just the way like it's set up, kind of like the ranged attacking and all, like how you can pick the different stages you want to go into. But I the fourth stage is the one I struggled with probably the most, the board game.
The dice maze?
Yeah, that one was rough, I thought.
It's really unique though.
It is cool.
Like I can't think very many other games that have done this. So the fourth level you can select is a dice maze, and there's a little board game laid out in front of you, and you throw a dice, and it can only be one, two, or three. And most of the board spaces will lead to a unique boss fight. But then there's also like take an item. There's a really hilarious one where it takes your gun away. And now you have to do punch attacks that are only animated and programmed for that one single boss fight. Like you got to admire that. You know what I mean? That took extra time.
That was a very confusing thing.
Oh, did you get that space?
Yeah, and it was just like, the heck am I supposed to do here? And it's like, I didn't know I could punch. And so that explains a lot. And I don't really know what the heck that thing is that I'm fighting. It's weird. And part of what made that so strange was also just none of that makes any sense compared to anything that came before it. It's like, okay, I'm fighting like those look like villains. And you start getting just weird faces and stuff out in the board game thing. And it's like, I don't fully know what's happened to this game. Like it's not like, oh, all four of these did something weird to them. It's three of them are all fairly normal, sort of themed, and then there's that. Like I really liked it, but it was also I did not feel prepared for it.
It's crazy because this game has 25 boss fights. And like half of them were in level 4 because each space is a unique boss to just that one space. And so you could play through this whole game and miss some really unique moments. The enemy Mike's referring to is named Curry Rice. And he's kind of a golem. I don't know if he's supposed to be a golem made out of rice. I because it's not like melon bread is melon bread. Melon bread is like a weird spectral face, but like I really, to use a tried and true expression, like they really let their freak flag fly with this boss rush through the maze palace.
Yeah, the giant amoeba was also just unnerving.
Abaranu, is that a real science thing? Abaranu gel?
Not that I've heard of.
Okay. You have any feelings, Brad? Any favorite from the weird well, let's just talk about all the bosses. Like, I mean, any boss is fair game as far as I'm concerned because they're all so cool.
Yeah, well, the thing I wanted to say about it, when I first played through it this time, I thought it was rigged because the way it was rolling the dice, I was hitting like all the battles, and then right before you finish it, the one space makes you go back to the beginning, and I got it. I landed right on that. It sent me back to the beginning of the board, and then the dice rolled perfectly. So I played literally every single battle the whole way through. I was like, does this just make you do everything, every fight? What's the point of the dice? Why don't you just let me run through them one by one?
I do find it annoying that it never really indicates clearly that the die can only be a one, two, or three.
Oh,
And so I'm just going like, this feels ridiculous. Because I think it took me like 10 rolls to get through, and it's like half of these are ones. This is absurd. And it's like, okay, no, this is just bad luck. This isn't like questionable luck.
but what's crazy though about Brad saying that he had to fight every boss is that yes, there is a space right before the end of the board, which sends you to the final boss fight, who's a cakewalk compared to the other things you've fought. And it sends you back to the start of the board. But every boss you've defeated, that space is now a reroll. And so you're saying even with the odds in your favor, Brad, you had to fight them all again? Like,
Every single, I mean, obviously you can't refight them, but yeah, every single space that wasn't completed, I landed on and had to do again. I mean, I actually ended up getting my first or getting a game over on that and having to start that whole thing over again. So that one was a little frustrating the first time around.
I want to go back to the levels real quick. We got to talk about the minecart level. It's so sick. You get this, it's a vehicle level, and you're in this high-tech minecart that's zooming, down this tunnel. And using magnets, you can double tap jump, and then you will now be attracted to the ceiling. And so you are at will jumping from floor to ceiling to fight enemies and avoid fire. Then you'll plunge down this elevator shaft, and now you're switching from left and right. And it's a really kinetic, fast, creative level that I really enjoyed. Probably one of my favorite minecart sequences of any game.
Well, my first time through it, I didn't realize you can double tap to like switch sides. So I was playing
Mm.
like the whole way up until like the boss, just like trying to jump over stuff and not know you can go up and down or left and right. So once I figured that, I was like, now this makes sense. This could have been a lot more fun.
Yeah, it really opens it up.
I was not a fan of it.
Really? I thought it was neat. What's your problem?
I think just the way it interacted with enemies did not feel consistent. In fact, I think I found out from the speed runs of this where I think it's you can kind of just like duck and you just don't interact with anything.
Oh, you just slide below all the enemies and their fire.
Yeah, and just like the enemy hitboxes don't cover that or something, and it's just like this. So there's that, and then I think this is also one where the boss was just obnoxious.
Yeah, Seven Force. So one thing that's cool about this game is that the developers, when they split off from Konami, they chose the Sega Genesis because I guess it had the ability to render more unique objects on the screen at one time than Super Nintendo could. And so they took advantage of that and had these iconic bosses where it's like 30 different sprites that are forming the shape of snakes and bodies and fists and things. It's very much a Treasure sort of signature. And Seven Force is one of the most infamous ones. It's made appearances in other games too. It's this panel of metal that will take the shape of snakes and guns and just, it's tough. That's tough. Should we get into our scores? Because that kind of has to do with my discussion of that. We're going to do a little tribute here to the Arcadiology podcast. So, as Brad mentioned, in addition to deep diving on these fairly obscure arcade games, they also compete to see who could beat the game for the least amount of quarters, which inspired this next bit on the old switcheroo where we are going to call high score and 31 years ago. Here we're going to compete to see which of us netted the high score on a single playthrough with no continues and no rewards. Arcadiology's Jordan smoked us on Star Fox and Star Fox 64, and Mike beat us both on Star Fox 2. So I'm hoping today's my day, but I don't know. Brad, you want to talk a little bit about how this scoring got kind of complicated? You discovered the problem with competing for a high score in Gunstar Heroes.
Yeah, when you initially pitched it, you said about see who gets the highest score, just running through on one life. And then when I was playing through, I noticed on the first stage, there's like pretty much infinite. It's a running gun, so there's infinite enemies if you just stand there and keep shooting them to rack up score. The problem with that normally is you'll have a timer or something, so you got to kind of get to the end. But for some reason, this game does not have a timer, which struck me as a little odd there. So you could theoretically just sit there for hours, days, I don't know, as long as you want to get a high score and just just keep killing all the enemies over and over again. So once I realized that, I was like, I don't want to do that. But I mean, if that's how you gotta win, so I brought it up to you. So we switched it up a little bit, I guess.
Yeah, we Brad proposed a gentleman's agreement that was one life, no continues, and no intentional farming of points. I think is kind of how we landed on it.
Yeah.
I
So I'm
believe
gonna go
the
first,
last
Brad.
thing that was said in the Discord was, let's scrap this for Gunstar. So I didn't do this.
Okay. Oh, was that a direct message, Brad? Ah, a little back channel. It got confusing.
No. That was from you, JMO.
Whatever.
Yeah, you initially scrapped it. We weren't planning on doing it. I think it might have just been today. I was like, I did it anyways. I just kind of marked my score down.
Yeah, and I said it'll be good to discuss.
Yeah,
I thought it'd be good to discuss because it's almost a Joy-Con of the game that you don't have a timer. Some arcadey things you'd expect, like a leaderboard at the end. They're kind of missing, you know?
yeah.
Wait, so am I about to win by default because none of you idiots wrote down your score?
Oh, I got my score. Don't you worry.
Dang it. Mike, you want to how do you want to do this?
Go right ahead.
Let's do a 1v1.
On my best run, I beat 3 of the 4 starting levels, but was ultimately taken down by 7 Force, like we were talking about earlier. It was his bird form that got me. So it netted me a high score of 443,025 points.
All right. My one life, I got up to the
He beat me. He freaking beat me.
I got up to the fourth stage of the board game, and I died on there. I only got 397,911. You got me.
Yeah.
I felt pretty good though with that one, but you topped me.
I don't like that Mike though didn't compete. I feel like now my win has an asterisk next to it.
I mean, that's what happens when you say, let's scrap this.
Look, Brad was prepared. Okay. I don't accept you. You know what? Here, tune in everyone on the finale. We'll settle this. Okay. Mike, our next episode, we can see if you can beat 443,000. I gotta go back though to a thing that this game just has is that it's just so crazy unique. In the second half of the game, you are no longer picking your levels. Now there's kind of more of a clear narrative. So you have to go down this like long bridge full of enemies to save your. Is it your sister? Is that her name? Gunstar Yellow is your sister?
Maybe they don't really explain that. I think they just are like, they've kidnapped Yellow, and she's somebody's sister, but I'm not really sure who.
Well, you have to go save the damsel in distress, more or less. But it is pretty fun though because the little villagers, why in level 1 are the villagers tiny compared to you? They're like ankle high little people. You're not a giant. You guys understand what I'm saying? Do you remember talking about level 1?
I didn't think those were what you're talking about are villagers.
Okay, what are they?
I don't know.
But you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I don't know what they were, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
It kind of gives me more the vibe of like in Phantom Menace, like when the Trade Federation's coming in and there's just a whole bunch of like animal life and stuff is running by before Jar Jar shows up.
Okay.
I just took it to be like animals and stuff are getting out of this part of the jungle.
Huh. I swear they have like little hats and clothes on. I'll have to take another look. But anyway, they sort of rise up against Colonel Red and like take him down. And then the next level is a space shooter. So now it's kind of changed genres. You get in a spaceship and you have a gun turret that rotates in the direction that you last moved. So it kind of changes up the mechanics a little bit. The gunship still has the same fire modes that you do on foot. So you still have that sort of consistency.
I loathed that level.
The space battle, why didn't you like it?
A huge amount of that was just the controls to it. Was having the ability to just like hold down fire and move is all great and all, except like if you get hit and it bumps you in a direction, now that changes the angle of your shot. So it was very frustrating to control the shot because then you'd have to then stop and like remove back to where you wanted to be firing.
Yeah, this is why I just used homing attacks the whole time.
Yeah, that was the way to go. My OP combo with the lightning homing. You just kind of hold it in.
The boss laser.
Yeah, yep, that's all you needed. I didn't like it too much till I came in with that combo. Then I was like, all right, this isn't so bad.
And then it just felt really long to then have to keep dying and go back to the very beginning.
So the space battle level has a really interesting boss fight against Timeron, because in the Dice Palace Timeron appears, and he has this countdown. And every time the big timer reaches 0, he'll drop like a big bomb on you. He reappears in the space level, but this time the timer counts up from 0. And you get a message that says, how long can you last? Did you guys mess with this boss at all?
Nope. I mean, I went a little bit to see that the bonus that you'd get would go up, but I did not care enough to figure out at what point something interesting would happen.
Do you know what happens, Brad?
I don't. I played twice. The first time I just, I'm just shooting everything as soon as I see it. So I killed it with like 1 second on the clock because it just died real quick. And the second time I went through, I waited about a minute and I was like, all right, I don't know if anything's supposed to happen, but I'm just gonna kill him now.
I was pleased to kill it in like 0.66 seconds.
Right. But that's not the challenge of this boss. The challenge of this boss is to try to keep it alive as long as possible, to survive without killing it. And it starts to fill the screen with bullets. And then after you've been fighting it for 10 minutes, bombs will start getting thrown in. And the attacks on the screen will get more and more and more and more and more. And if you can last to 100 minutes, 100 freaking minutes, an hour and 40 minutes of this one boss, it will blow up and it says you open the Satori mind, which according to a Twitter or an X, I guess, Mega Drive Shock is a reference to the Satori shooting practice program, which was a computer game that the devs were obsessed with while they were developing Gunstar Heroes. And I really wanted to, for our listeners, to tell them that I survived 100 minutes, but at 25 minutes, it became unavoidable. Death just became, I don't know how anyone would accomplish this. But I thought it was neat, fun little Easter egg.
You were there for 25 minutes circling around that thing.
More than that, because I was rewinding to survive.
Man,
So probably fought it for almost an hour trying to get to 100 minutes.
that's dedication there.
How was it handling at that point?
What do you mean?
That feels like it was going to start lagging as it got to more and more objects on screen.
I mean, it was fine, honestly. Like, I mean, it's mostly just bullets, so I don't know if that's simpler to render than, every one of those is just one moving object. And when you consider just the sheer number of moving objects on the screen at any time in Gunstar Heroes, it's probably not that resource intensive. The game does not have everything perfectly down pat. One last thing I want to say before I go on to the Joy-Cons. I liked the bosses in this game that did not put up a fight. Several times in the game, there's this character named Melon Bread, and his face, he has one attack that can technically hurt you, but it's such a slow moving attack that you almost never see it unless you're trying to die. In the dice
quad
maze,
glacier.
there's the what now?
The
The
quad,
quad
laser.
laser. Yes, no one can escape the quad laser. From Aqua Teen Hunger Force. Sick reference. That was good. In the dice maze, you can fight one of the little soldiers, and he's like up to your knees. He's that tiny. He kind of puts up a good fight, if I'm being totally honest. I love the final fight against the Emperor because he tries to use the gems to power himself up, and it fries him instead. And he like literally doesn't even get like a boss screen. I love that because like if you this is gonna get us flagged weird, Mike, but if you fought your way to Vladimir Putin, you know what I mean? It's not like Putin would be the toughest guy you fought. You know what I mean? Like I love it when video games, the big brain behind it does not put up a good fight. And my favorite one is the final great soldier on the bridge level. And he has one attack called Love Love Dance. And he just kind of sways and can't hurt you and just sort of dances for you until you decide to kill him. I laughed so hard. Did you guys think this game was funny?
Yeah, there are definitely some goofy moments that I get you.
I got a chuckle out of me. Does anyone else have anything to say that they liked about Gunstar Heroes?
We didn't really talk about did we say about it's not really something I liked, but just that there's two options. Did either of you guys use the fixed shot? There's like the fixed shot, so I guess you can't move and shoot at the same time. I don't even understand how you could play like that. That'd be rough.
I feel like Mike played that way.
No, I had free shot because I figured I was going to spend a lot of this time running and fixed shot. So I think it was stronger shots,
Okay.
but also a drop kick. And it was just like, those feel like you have to be better at the game to make the most of it. I'm going to go with the thing that lets me scramble.
Yeah, Yeah, because so much of the game is avoiding enemy fire. Like it's so much is happening. And yeah, that's one of my Joy Cons, Brad, is that like when you pick your weapon at the start of the level, you pick between free shot and fixed shot. And free shot means you can move while firing. And you have to move in the direction that you're firing, essentially. But fixed shot is that your character will be anchored in place and fire. And like Mike said, only fixed shot players can use the kick attacks, which like I didn't think they were that strong. I don't maybe I didn't try them on the right bosses. But then what's weird is that only in free shot mode can you block. Do you guys ever use the block function in this game? Brad made a face. He didn't even know that was in there.
Nope, no idea that was there.
Yeah, it's like you can hold down attack and jump, and you will throw up your hands and defend yourself, and you still take damage, just not as much. Which could be interesting because in some of these boss fights, it's like a bullet hell. It's like, okay, I know I'm not going to dodge this. I'll just sacrifice a few seconds of fire to save some health. Kind of interesting.
I've definitely used like the slide attack and the diving attack. Those are pretty useful, but I didn't know about the block.
The diving attack I thought felt weird. Like I kind of wished it launched you a little more forward.
Yeah, it was a little awkward. I kind of would use it just to kind of rush through sometimes. If there was like one of the stages in particular, there was like it seemed like it went on forever. I would just kind of running and diving through some stuff.
How did you guys feel about the throw mechanic? So whether it's an ally or an enemy, if you get up close to a small enemy, you will chuck it. And it will like ping pong off of other enemies. And it does a lot of damage, but it also interrupts like your stream of fire. I didn't love it.
I thought it was useful in some situations. I think more actually bosses to get them out of away from me and in a spot where I could shoot them from a distance, which was nice. It wasn't as useful dealing with just a lot of small enemies in my mind because I was using weapons that were powerful enough to kill them. Though it did lead to the problem that I hadn't expected when we tried out the 2-player mode, which is that if you're just holding fire and run past the other person, sometimes, and I don't know what the additional trigger for this is, sometimes you'll just throw them instead. And it's like, I've just been holding down fire the whole time.
I don't believe you. I think he wanted to throw me off that building. I saw it. I saw the hunger in his eyes, Brad.
I wanted to, but I wasn't going to do it.
I don't know. I just felt like it just made the game. It was already hectic, before enemies were ping ponging off each other. And this is a Joy-Con that I didn't know until Mike and I played 2-player mode right before recording. I don't have the best internet connection, but it's not terrible. I feel like it has parity with like what most people would have around their home with a Wi-Fi connection. My laser fire went totally invisible, and Mike said he could see it on his screen. It's weird.
Yeah, that's not an internet thing.
Well, but if the frame rate was sacrificed by the connection, couldn't it?
It still is existing in frames. Like that feels like it's Nintendo Switch Online's rendering failing on part of this.
It's weird. It was weird. I didn't expect it. Didn't like it. Didn't expect it. I also so this game is just this escalation roller coaster, big bosses, creative bosses. I felt the final boss is kind of a letdown.
So I do think a step back, because we haven't really properly described what the game is, as far as a goal, is the backstory for this. Man, they named things really creatively. Is like a grandfather or something, some elder family member is Professor White Gunstar, who at some point in the past defeated the villainous robot Golden Silver and took 4 gems that had been used to power the robot. And the whole initial part of this is that those 4 gems that he had taken from that and were keeping have been stolen. And so the initial first 4 levels are recovering each of those gems. And then once you have them all back, then they get stolen again, and you have these backs and forths, and it is a very lengthy thing of additional levels of trying to get these same gems that I thought we had taken care of at the beginning. Kind of with throwing in things like, by the way, Yellow, who we have not mentioned up until this point, is now kidnapped, and that's important now.
Wait. Are you implying that there's kidnappings that aren't important? Like, I feel like you got annoyed at having to rescue your sister.
A sister that I've only now just been told exists in a situation involving negotiating with terrorists. A little bit of a concern. To protect, in the game it says Earth. In the manual it's Gunstar 9. But there's a certain balance here. It's like, oh, well, if this gives them ultimate power, then handing this over is not actually saving anybody.
Well, okay, but Doctor Strange gave the Infinity Stone to Thanos. You know what I mean? Like,
and that went real great.
It worked out. It worked out in the end for most people.
But yeah, and so the final level, we already kind of mentioned that there's one of the villains that sort of tries to use the stones and just fails. And then it goes on to your very final boss of Gold and Silver is back. And part of what I enjoyed about that fight is because he shows up at a distance and then jumps forward to where you are. And he shows up. One of the things I like with these bosses is it does show how much health they have whenever they show up.
Right. There's a little number at the top of the screen. Yeah.
And so he shows up with it listing him as having 9,999 health.
Oh, that's cool.
And so then I started firing at him because I have a weapon and this is a video game and that's what you do. And the number didn't budge.
Oh.
And I'm like, that's concerning.
Right.
And he just stands there and just takes the shots for kind of a while.
Huh.
And I've kind of eventually approached him like, okay, I'm going to try, like, I tried throwing him around and stuff, and nothing was really working. And occasionally I had to see a little bit of the damage go by, and it took a while to figure out that what was happening was I had stray shots that were hitting the gems, which are still floating up above the battlefield. And it was eventually like, I have to hit the gems. That is not what I anticipated here. And it's a very interesting sort of discovery, just like, why is this boss taking all damage with no problems?
That's a storytelling moment that's kind of ruined by having homing shots. Because I was like, oh, okay, shoot the gems. You know, like,
The homing got me messed up a couple times because it would lock on to, like, in certain levels, things that you really can't damage, especially the easy mode gun there with the laser. It would just kind of like box around the enemy, or it's something like the space level, like the asteroids. It would keep on targeting the asteroid, and I can't actually hit the enemy, so I got to let go of the fire and try to, like, I guess, get a little closer to the enemy you want to shoot, so it locks onto the right one. So yeah, there were times that actually hung me up having that homing weapon.
yeah, I guess that's why they let you change your ammunition. That felt a little clunky though, because like I would see like, oh, there's a lightning power up. I want to pick that up and get rid of the fire. Is that so? You'd have to press the change weapon button and then have the one you don't want be flashing.
I just would change it twice if necessary. Because whenever you picked one up, it would drop the other one. So you could rotate through quickly.
Yeah, that's what I did.
I thought I always kind of tripped over it and just tended not to bother with it. But I mean, I'm nitpicking. This game is a sick game. I don't know. Do you guys like it overall? We'll get into the Nintendo or NintenDON'T, but I think there's a lot of things there's a lot of stuff you can say that's good about this game.
Along those same lines, I did begin to get very frustrated with the way that this just kept throwing. It's the final battle of this. I'm like, okay, am I finally done with this? I'm like, and then a new thing would happen after. I'm like, how freaking long is this game going to go? Of how many endings? Because it just kept being like okay, here's another thing. Am I finally done? No. And I very nearly gave up, I think, on two separate points of this, where I'm like, okay, you know what? This is the last run I'm giving on this boss, because I have no idea how long this is going for, and I'm getting tired of this. And then would get by. Or in the final boss case, eventually figured out what I needed to be doing enough to get far enough to be like, okay, I see what needs to happen. It was still really hard to execute successfully.
But you did it, and you didn't use rewinds.
No, yeah, I eventually got there, but it was like infinite continues was very important to this. Like that just should, I kind of just think that should be a given. Because if you want to have it finish in a way that feels impressive, you redo it. If you just want to reach the end, you can force your way through eventually.
Yeah, I felt the same way. With it just kept on going on and on. Like after the fourth stage, I shouldn't have thought that was the end. That was short. But I was like, this is a pretty short game. That was a nice, fun little game. And then it went on. I was like, another boss is like, all right, this has got to be the end. Then you get to the space level, and then you get to the final boss rush. I was like, man, this game is harder and longer than I was actually expecting.
And what it does at the very end, I was nearly so frustrated to reveal the very end of the game after you've defeated Gold and Silver. And it's like, I think it's like everyone's returning back and you've destroyed the gems. And then it's like, we've awakened something. We're all in trouble. What are we going to do without weapons? And I'm like, I swear to God, if this is another level, I'm done. And then
it's just the cutscene. It's
just a cutscene where someone heroically sacrifices themselves and you're done. It's like, thank God. Because it's like, I was so done with this at that point. Because it's like, just because there kept being this feels like the final level for so long. I mean, I thought the boss rush was going to be it. There's the bit in there where it kind of looks like you're inside the second Death Star, fighting weird things coming around, like that keeps circling around, which, to the game's credit, is a really interesting use of depth, but was also frustrating.
I got to give a shout out though to that boss gauntlet because you fight, kind of powered up forms of all the enemies you've defeated already. But now your perspective is the villain's security camera. Like they're all watching you and reacting to the battle, and then after you defeat each one, you'll see one of the characters from the security room like march out of the room, and then they're the next person you fight. I don't know. I just love every time a game plays with a perspective. Anything else to criticize about the game before we go into our second of the night
I do think the naming could have been better.
of bosses?
Everybody, because just about everybody is just named with a color. Some of them don't even necessarily seem to use that color much, but it's just like everyone's named with a color, and when it's within a group, it's like okay, they've decided to color code themselves, whatever. But just like everybody's on board for this, so the heroes are all have color coded names. The villains all have color coded names. The one female villain is pink because of course she is, and it's like I feel like we could have tried a little bit more with the names.
Then you got the bosses. You got curry rice and melon bread. The first boss is papaya dance. And it attacks with giant caterpillars, Mike. Like, I get that the color thing isn't very imaginative, but they make up for it elsewhere, I think. All right, you guys ready for our second and final game of the night?
Yep, let's do it.
Yep.
All right, so let's move on to Sin and Punishment, released for the Nintendo 64, only in Japan and China, but not North America, in the year 2000. According to Nintendo Switch Online, escape Tokyo and crush the mutant threat. On a future Earth starved for resources, a new species engineered for consumption has mutated into monsters. Run, gun, and slash your energy sword through level after level in this high-energy thrill ride of non-stop destruction. End the mutants' reign of terror. Not to be outdone by the action, however, the storyline lends the game its soul and draws you even further into the mix. Uncover the intriguing mystery of teenagers Saki and Eren as they go head-to-head with rival groups claiming to protect the Earth. A variety of options and a number of different skill levels are all you'll have to prepare yourself for the full-blown challenge of Turbo Hard Mode. Take a deep breath, gather your energy, and feast your senses on this unforgettable high-speed roller coaster of Sin and Punishment. So hype. Good job, whoever wrote the Nintendo Switch Online description. I don't know, Brad. What do you think?
Yeah, that was good. That covered it, huh? It's pretty intense there.
Yeah, I liked it. So since people's first impressions was often the box art, here is the Japanese box art. It was pretty much identical to the Chinese one. When it was released on the IQ player. Remember the IQ player, Mike? That little system that Nintendo made to get around Chinese legal loopholes and things. The Sin and Punishment cover they're kind of drawn sort of manga style. You have your protagonists in the center, Saki and Eren, and then their sort of quest giver Achi behind them. And I don't know. I don't love this cover, but what do you guys think?
I don't know if I feel like the cover gives much of an indication of the gameplay, but I feel like it's weird. It feels representative of the cutscenes, which in turn feel fairly anime-esque.
Yeah.
Like the cutscenes, especially later on in the game, feel to me like a combination of like Evangelion and Dracula.
Yeah, absolutely. The storyline's wild. But like, I mean, you wouldn't really know that from this. I get what you're saying. Like the characters are drawn with kind of really sharp edges. And that's because to make this game run so well, Treizure deliberately severely limited the number of polygons per character, which is how this game is able to have so much on the screen. I mean, there's an argument to be made that this is the best performing Nintendo 64 game ever made, just because of how cinematic and how dynamic the camera angles are. But like you said, Mike, the gameplay it's chaos, and this is kind of a reserved sort of cover. It was developed by Treizure, as we said before. According to a 27 interview with Treizure president Masato Maegawa, this interview was conducted by Satoru Iwata of all people. The concept for Sin and Punishment started way back in 1997 when the Treizure developers became fascinated with the concept of a game that had the players holding the left two prongs of the Nintendo 64 controller, which outside of Sin and Punishment is pretty much unheard of. I think there was like one controller option in like Wave Race or 1080 or something that did this as well, but this was a pretty unique way to hold the controller. And Mike, you played, I'm assuming, with the Nintendo 64 controller I got you for Christmas a couple years ago.
Yes.
And so did you play it like this, holding the left prongs?
Yes, because why it was designed to do. Because I think it's worth going over this a bit. So, for anyone that doesn't know or doesn't remember the N64 controller, you have a D-pad on the left side, you have the A and B button and the C buttons on the right side, and then you have the joystick in the middle. And so, most games I associate with, you use your left hand is on the joystick, your right hand is the A and B buttons and the C buttons. It is so weird to have your left hand on the D-pad handling your motion and your right hand doing your aiming using the joystick.
Well, but I mean, that's what modern games function as. Like in Halo, you move with your left thumb and you aim with your right.
I would say both that there's a lot of not as much that, or certainly it's a D-pad, which is a weird form of your motion anyway. There's certainly also that I do not play that many games that do that.
Brad, how'd you play this? Did you use a Nintendo 64 controller?
I wish I did. I actually, when we talked about doing this episode, I actually ordered one of those Nintendo Switch Online N64 controllers to prepare for it. And then I just kept putting it off. I looked up like the time to beat on this game. It said like 45 minutes, which I was surprised when it took me way longer than that to beat it. But or play through it. It was so much longer than I expected. So and I was putting it off, and then I ended up playing it on my Steam Deck so I could play it on the go. I play on my break at work and stuff. So I was able to like remap the controls and pretty much use the same kind of modern shooter layout, move with the left stick, aim with the right stick, and then I had bumper for jumping and then triggers for shooting. So it was when I originally booted it up, like it kind of defaulted, the sticks were swapped. And I didn't realize it at first. I was like, something just feels off about this. I don't know what it is, but I was like, I can't aim. I don't know why. Like usually somewhat decent at some first person shooters. So I was like, what's going on here? Why can't I aim? Then it hit me. I was like, after I got past the first level, I was like, I need to swap these sticks. And then once I did that, it felt pretty decent.
Yeah, even just where the hands are with relation to one another on the controller feels weird. Like when I finished playing, I rated out to prior guest Riri, and it's like, yeah, it's this weird controls, and it's like, yeah, you're doing this like that's how it always is. No. Left hand on the far left and control on the right, and she kind of like, yeah, like it's like, no, you got the hand, you're putting the hands normal. It's like, oh, I do not like this. It's like, yeah,
Oh, yeah. Because I mean, I every now and then I get like a fighting game on N64, so like then you're having the D-pad hand and the A and B button hand. So like there's two combinations that most games will use, but yeah, both on the left. I don't know. I love when anyone, a filmmaker, a game developer, an author, take a chance, do something weird. You know what I mean? It's so much more fun.
yeah. I definitely give them credit for the. We decided to build a whole game off of the idea of what if we made people do this and what would make that work. And it was why I was somewhat surprised that right at the beginning in the training the tutorial thing it gives you, it's like you can hold the controller either way. You can just switch over to the other mode. And it's like, I'm going to go with what they did on purpose for this. I can't think of other games that right off the bat were like, by the way, you can change the controllers from what we're doing to you.
We know you're going to be uncomfortable. The thing about the developing the game with the controller in mind, that was from that interview I mentioned. And in that same interview, they said that upon playing an early prototype of the game, Nintendo director Hitoshi Yamagami was reportedly impressed by the game, but thought that its difficulty needed to be lowered. The Treizure developers responded by saying that no one with such low skill at the game should be in charge of the project. And
Get good, he said.
I can't think of a corporate negotiation that was basically get good. Like, I thought that was pretty sick. So before we get into the Joy Pros and Joy Cons of Sin and Punishment, how far did we each get? Brad, can we start with you?
Yeah, I was originally trying to go through without using any save states and stuff, but this game was way harder than I thought it was going to be. I thought I was just going to breeze through it, a nice little breezy 45 minutes, one sit down that I ended up saving, coming back later. And I got up to the fourth stage, and judging by my time, I was like, all right, I'm probably close to the end, but that was like a quarter of the way through because that's when the game starts or I think it was the fourth stage. Whenever you fight like this little cat boss, it might have even been earlier than that. I thought I was near the end of the game, and I was like, oh man, there's a lot more going on here than I thought. So
Do you mean the one that's like the weird thing that's like jumping around on top of columns
yes, yeah, that was my first hang up in the game.
Okay, yeah.
But I eventually did get through abusing save states like crazy. Once I got up to stage 4 is whenever I had my first game over. And then I was like, I'm not going to be able to finish this game if I don't do this. I'd rather see it through.
So you think you're gonna go back to it?
Nope. Save state my way through was good enough. I'm not gonna try to actually get through this one legit. That's rough.
But did you beat the whole game with save states?
I did, yeah, yeah.
You intended,
Nintendo.
ファミリーコンピュータ
and I intended.
Nintendo.
ファミリーコンピュータ
The game is pretty generous with giving you extra continues every time you destroy 100 enemies, which I know that sounds like a lot, but it's nothing in this game. Enemies just keep coming at you. So every 100 enemies you destroy, you get a free continue. And the checkpoints are pretty generous, I felt. Like I would die and then it would start me in the middle of the level instead of going back to the beginning each time. Mike, how'd you do?
If you remember, there's a part of this after you defeat a space station, you're chasing a projectile down towards a
Friend.
friend, giant robot, mutant. I don't know what's going on.
We're gonna get into that.
And you're basically having to destroy it before he destroys it and you.
Yeah, so you are, because like we said, just for context, because I want to make sure that the viewers have a clear view of this, and I'll put footage in the YouTube video. Your friend is now this Godzilla kaiju thing, and this space station fires a gigantic bullet, like a bullet the size of like Mexico, is rocketing down towards the Earth, and you're chasing the bullet, trying to destroy it before it destroys your friend, or if he destroys you and the bullet, defending himself. Okay, so continue, Mike.
It's like 8 feet across.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm remembering it more dramatically, but what was your?
When it gets close up, you can hit it with a sword.
Yeah, and you're larger than life. Just explain your problem with it, okay? I know I'm misremembering this.
I burnt through my last 7 credits on that, and I could never do damage fast enough.
You know what you have to do, right?
I mean, I suspect what I have to do is the same thing the executive did and get good, because there's 2 weapons modes. One mode is it's tracking for you, and so you just kind of have to lock on, and then it'll fire, but it's doing less damage. I cannot aim well enough, early enough on to do enough damage from the start. And because of the way they set up the continue system, you have like 10 continues, and then you can earn more as you go. Once you're out of those continues, then the whole thing starts back over again. And so it was very much a situation where I'm like, I think I have just hit a skill level on this of I cannot aim well enough at this to get past this level. And once I was done, I was going to have to start the whole thing back over again.
Yeah. And that part did bug me. I mean, I don't want to jump to the Joy-Cons, but like it feels wrong that there's this one boss fight that you can't win with your preferred control scheme. They force you to switch over. I mean, I like that you have that option, but I don't know. I would have just tweaked that one a little bit to give you a chance.
Yeah, it feels so different from what I liked about the earlier boss battles, or some of the earlier battles, where what you were doing may not be working, but it's more about figuring out the correct thing. I think it may be the first boss that just like does not take damage really from regular fire.
The wolf, you mean?
Yeah, wolf or tiger or something, whatever. And it was just the realization of, oh, wait a minute, I just need to switch over to using the sword, and then that works. Or one of the other ones where it was, firing at it was not doing much damage, but it's like, oh, if I switch over to countering the missiles that are coming at me, those do huge amounts of damage. So it was things were like, okay, these are within my skill set. I just have to change tactics. But that one felt like, no, this is just you must be this good to continue. And I am not.
So let's clarify something that makes this game unique from Gunstar Heroes is that you have this very unique weapon called the dolphin gun. This is a picture on YouTube here of Saki's Smash Brothers assist trophy. And you have like kind of this submachine gun that you're constantly shooting at stuff. And then whenever anything gets close enough, you tap the fire button and you'll do like this really powerful slash attack. And so the game can't really feasibly be beaten by just projectiles alone. You need to use your sword for certain boss fights. And the most common mechanic is that you need to reflect slow moving enemy projectiles. You can reflect missiles and bombs, and you'll knock it wherever you're aiming. And that does the big damage that you need in order to, beat the game in a timely manner. Because if you run out of time, you start to die. There is a timer in this game that punishes you by slowly draining your health. And all of this is taught to you, this unique control scheme, these unique mechanics is taught to you in this really sick training mode where you have like these holograms and you're challenged to pick up chains of power-ups. You can shoot apples off the heads of targets and it's worth more that way. And it even has a fight with Melon Bread, which is Treisure's recurring boss. It appears in Gunstar Heroes, we talked about it earlier, and then Alien Soldier and this one. And the training mode is this really fun, tight little experience, and it gives you a score at the end. So we're going to do round 2, high score, and 24 years ago. Mike, you have your score for this one, right?
Yeah, I'd like to go first so that I can be in the lead for a little bit of this.
Go.
My practice score was 30,983,767.
You're a dick. You're like, oh, I want to be in the lead. You beat me.
Really? I missed whole swaths of that.
Right? What? I played this several times and got 28,731,145. Did you read it right?
I thought I had.
I only missed like one bingo. I wonder if it's because you get more points. No, you use the home. I'm sure you use the homing method most of all.
Pretty sure.
All right, Brad, what's your score for the?
I didn't do too good. I only ran through it once, and that was 23,907,000 and some change.
Then it must have done something weird with my score because that can't possibly be right.
I mean, I didn't go too hard on it. I did one. I played the game first and then came back and did this. So I kind of understood. I skipped through everything. And I actually played this on my Steam Deck. And so I was using the N64 Japanese ROM. So I'm assuming it's all the same. But yeah, all my stuff was in Japanese.
Well, congratulations, Mike.
That can't yet. No, I don't think this is a win because there has to be something.
Tune into the finale, so we'll see if Mike's a freaking cheater, but not the way that I usually cheat.
So I think that means you win because that can't possibly be correct.
Did you take a screenshot?
I got the whole thing's on. I streamed it.
All right, we'll investigate. This election's not over. Okay, we're still got some final tallying to do. So, Brad, did you like Sin and Punishment? I get the vibe you liked Gunstar. Did you like Sin and Punishment?
I did like it. It was harder and more difficult, or a longer game than I expected, but overall it was pretty fun. I had my fun time with it. It almost felt like an arcade like gun shooter, but instead of that, you're kind of in there with a controller. So I mean, again, a bunch of boss battles here, and I struggled for a while, not realizing that you can do the melee attack. So I'm just holding in, shoot everywhere, run around. And it took me incredibly long to realize that once you run out of time, your life starts draining. I didn't realize that till like the end of the game. So I guess I mostly just kept up with it. Then I was going through pretty far and I was like, why am I dying? Like, that's at the point I was using the save state. So I'd keep going back and be like, what is going on here? Nothing's hitting me. And then I looked up and was like, my timer's ticking down. That's what's going on. But yeah, overall it was a pretty fun game. It was so weird. Like, I don't know, like you said about like they use like a low amount of polygons. I was going to ask, like, is this game intentionally so weird? Like the character models are so strange, like the way they move around and stuff. I don't know. It was like kind of creepy just the way some of those cutscenes are. And their shapes are just so awkward. And the one scene at like one of the movie scenes or cutscenes or whatever it clicks to, it was like went onto the character and his eyes were closed, and it was like they were closed for like 3 seconds. It was like the longest blink ever. I was like, what are they doing? Is this supposed to be like a weird horror? Like, I don't know. It was cool for what it was. It was so strange.
The characters do have sort of that kind of dead-eyed look, like there's something that's just it's off-putting. And I guess this is a good enough time to talk about the story. The story is shit crazy. Like we talked about in the description of the game that the plot is in this far future. people are so starved for resources that in order to avoid eating the dogs and cats of Springfield, they create this new species of creature that multiplies really quickly. And so we'll just eat that. And so that then they start to rise up and evolve and fight back. And that's the ruffians. Those are the monsters you fight in the game. Then there's the soldiers. They are the armed volunteers, which I kind of loved. Like that felt like very, very possible, like a global force called the armed volunteers. And they are fight back against the ruffians, but they're also oppressing the people of Japan. And so you belong to this third fighting force who call themselves the Saviors. And you're led by this psychic kid named Achi, who's helping you rebel against the government and fight the monsters yourself. But as Brad knows, because he beat the game, this is all a metaphor for like relationships and letting people into your heart. Do you know what I'm talking about, Brad?
The story was over my head, man. It was too far for me. I was trying to follow for a while. I was like, I don't even know what's going on. I still watched the cutscene, just they were entertaining, just how awkward they were. But yeah, the story was way past me, so I didn't catch that.
So there's two main characters, Saki and Aaron. There's a boy agent, girl agent, right? And after like level 2, the boy becomes a giant kaiju Evangelion-esque monster and now needs to be saved. It's corrupting his body. He's becoming full-on monster permanently. And Aaron, who isn't really your love interest at the beginning of the game, she literally carves her way into your heart. She like cuts the heart open and climbs inside, and that leads to this train sequence, this flash forward where you see 10 years into the future and you meet your future child. Aaron meets the child that she will have with Saki, and it's totally an Evangelion reference. Mike, that was a good call. Like, come on, even the color scheme of the train. Mike? Do you remember the train hallucinations from Evangelion?
I've got to rewatch it.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's an obvious homage to it. And so then once Saki decides to finally let the woman fully into his heart, you become your super kaiju form and you take on the final boss. And the levels are really, really imaginative. I think the coolest one is you're fighting this fleet of battleships as you are standing on a piece of concrete that is being telekinetically zipped around. Did you guys both get to this level?
Yes, this is just before where I eventually failed.
But like Mike, you like this level, right?
It was a very cool level. Like I almost even just enjoy that you're not necessarily having to kill everything, but you can kind of choose what you're killing. So I started trying to kill the ships, and I don't know if you can fully, but you can totally deflect missiles into a way that they hit the ships and seem to do the ships damage. So I'm like, I think these are killable if I'm better.
Which is a cool feeling.
Yeah.
Like I love the destructible environments. Like there's this elevator level where it's like you can take out the platforms. You can pretty much shoot whatever you want on the screen. You can shoot the enemies, you can shoot their projectiles, you can shoot the platforms they're standing on. When you're dive bombing the battleship, you can shoot individual soldiers standing on the deck of the battleship.
So satisfying.
Yeah, it's so satisfying, right? And it has this kinetic movement that remind me of like theme park rides, like Star Tours. Like it's unlike anything I've ever seen on the Nintendo 64 and unique in just even modern games today.
I do also appreciate that the destructible environment stuff often was if you can realize to shoot the environment instead, it's like I shoot this one thing and I will kill several people rather than having to take them out individually. So it both allows you to destroy the environment and it's also incentivizing it.
There's no greater endorphin hit than shooting a red barrel in a video game and seeing the enemies fly. Brad, did you like the levels?
Yeah, they're pretty varied. You guys were talking about that ship, the battleship level. That's the one that hung up on me. And I was like, man, this is where I got to start using save states because that had to be the longest stage in the game, right? That one just kept going on and on. I was like, is this ever going to end? I was like, I got to the end of it before I had to save state. Then I died and got a game over there. I was like, there's no way I'm going to do this all over again. So we're going to have to load it back up and run that one back from the beginning of the stage because I'm not starting this over.
It actually was fairly forgiving in that what feels like all sort of one level, more or less, had at least two spots that if you died after that, you go to that point instead.
There is a hard game over though, right? Once you run out of credits, the whole game it's done and you get the whole way back. So that was rough.
Yeah, if At that point, you can go to scene selection,
Ah, okay.
but you
Oh.
only have one credit.
Oh.
So it's not like it's not like you can pick up and kind of regain momentum. And those are a little bit like, I think for that, ultimately where I died is sort of like after this or toward the tail end of this level, depending on how you think about it. I'm honestly not sure, but the latest in the game I could start over was the very start of this level. And I had at least 3 checkpoints after that to where I died.
Appreciate though that the game has a scene selection, because like this is a level I'd want to show people. I don't necessarily want them to like have to get here, but this battleship level is such a showpiece. I thought the 2D levels were interesting. It's wild because most of the game you're behind your character and the D-pad will make you strafe left or right. But a couple of times the camera will fully pull out to 2D perspective, and now instead of strafing, you're just moving left or right. But you're still free aiming, and like amazingly the mechanics are completely unchanged but function as a 2D platformer. I don't know. I was like, okay, this game's got some tricks. This one part though lives rent free in my head, and I swear I'm not just trying to be clickbaity. Do you guys, or Brad, I don't think you got to this, Mike, but Brad, do you remember like the fertility clinic slash maybe abortion clinic level?
Oh man, I did not pick up on that.
You
I
didn't
see.
pick up on it?
No.
It's really wild because this is the point of the game where Saki is struggling to accept that he loves Aaron and he's ready to commit to their future relationship and future child. And you fight this boss called Birth Model. And it's very cellular. It's this big wall of flesh, and then it's kind of like has like sort of a umbilical cord tendril attack. And you're just in this tiny, cramped little room. It's clearly some kind of doctor's office. And the character is literally struggling with whether or not he's ready to be a father. So that's why I mean, I've never seen a boss fight in such a tiny room before. And I'm strafing back and forth between like the counter and the health posters on the wall. It was just like, I don't know why this one just stuck in my head, but one of the most unique moments I've ever had in a video game. Whether it was an abortion clinic or fertility clinic, what a weird game I'm saying right now for a Nintendo 64 game.
On the general themes, I do also think it's a little odd in that you're like, well, did you realize that this thing with kaiju is really about accepting people into your life?
Yeah.
And that is almost exactly what I had sort of said coming out of Pacific Rim, and everyone thought I was utterly insane because I thought it was a very clear metaphor, and everyone else was like, "You're fighting giant monsters." I'm like, okay, apparently that's just me. But I find that even more intriguing as a connection because this game has a 2-player mode,
What?
apparently. And here's what's weird about what I read about what this has as a 2-player mode is it has a 2-player mode, but there's not 2 characters. It's that in a 2-player mode, one player is controlling the movement and the other is controlling the fighting.
Well,
And
we
so
gotta
you
try that.
have to be on the same page, not unlike Pacific Rim requiring you to be like synced to control the Jaegers.
Like, we gotta try this. This sounds really fun. Like, and especially since there's levels where you control the kaiju, you control the Evangelion. Like, that's perfect.
Yeah, like that's at least according to the copy of a manual that I found for this is when playing with 2 players, both people cooperate to control different actions of a single character. Player 1 controls the character's movements, while player 2 is in charge of attacking. And that is,
That's wild.
yeah, that is a really interesting way to decide that you want a 2-player mode in there and that that's what you're going to do.
That makes sense though. I mean, because it's a big ask. Dodging, attacking. This game is so frenetic. I would really, we got to try it before the anniversary episode. Maybe Brad wants to try it too. Like, I think that's neat. And the game has a really poignant and cool ending, in my opinion. I love when you have an OP character. They did this for the Superman Returns open world game, which got crapped on way more than it deserved. But in the final battle, you have to defend Earth. And you are standing on the atmosphere of Earth as the hidden twist villain of the game is trying to become the new Earth. Now, I didn't say they're trying to take over the Earth. They want to be the new Earth. They become a planet. And now your goal is to destroy the rival planet while intercepting all of the shots that are raining down. They can hit you, but the real danger is hitting the earth below you. And so you're frantically having to defend your planet. And it kind of reminded me of it's like Space Invaders, I think, or kind of Centipede almost. Like uh, normally it bugs me when a game changes mechanics for the final boss fight, but I thought this one was really sick. What'd you think of the final boss, Brad? Did you like it too?
Yeah, I had trouble with it at first. It was pretty tough because there's like the little meteor showers coming down, and then there's like these giant ones that fly at you. And that one I think is instant kill. Like it hits the earth and it's over. I didn't realize you had to actually melee those ones to deflect them. Once you got past that, I mean, it was still hard the whole way through. But yeah, that was a pretty cool little addition there, the way they changed up the game. How you said they changed it up earlier for a side scrolling kind of section, and they have that segment where you have to defend the earth. They mixed the gameplay up, kept it fresh.
Feels very Missile Command.
Missile Command, that's what I was thinking of. Yes, thank you. So I think we are high on a lot of parts of this game. Can we start criticizing it? Get some Joy Cons?
Yeah, I'll start. I freaking died.
Yeah, it was tough.
I died and at a point where it's just all my continues went away, and it's very much a start from the beginning.
Unless you want to do the scene select and have one continue to try to get to the next scene. That's pretty rough.
Yeah.
This game is, if you haven't been able to tell, it's a 3D shooter, but all of the attacks are 2D sprites. And that makes the hit detection kind of literally like it literally kind of blurs the line between you and the attacks. And it really puts this problem front and center early. There's a part in the training mission where you have to climb this pyramid of translucent cubes. I struggled to figure out where the edge was with this one. And then there's when you first take the kaiju form, you are in this giant ocean of blood, and there's this huge blood wave attack, and it doesn't look like you can jump over it. It looks like because of the way that the wave is animated, there's like a little gap in between, but you can only be double jumped over. And I could see some people getting frustrated by what feels like cheap hits and kind of being like, this game is kind of emptying my bucket too much to commit to.
That was a very frustrating spot because I needed to have enough health to get through it. And this felt like a really tough battle to get through because it has like 3 or 4 different modes. And I kind of just accepted those waves as not avoidable and just kind of had to be doing well enough going into it that wasn't going to kill me. Although this is the part that I was the part where I'm like, this is Evangelion meets Dracula, because on one hand you have, I guess, kaiju things. They also feel very giant robot like to me.
Yeah.
But then the cutscene also keeps doing like this shot of just eyes and like telepathic communication, and so it's very stylized. It's a thing where I'm like, I feel like I would much rather watch this. Like, if this was a movie, I'm on board.
Okay. The perspective can sometimes create kind of illogical sequences. You guys are talking about this fight where it's really disturbing. You have to like kill this little kitty thing. It's the like kind of animal form of one of the antagonists, but it's like me. Oh, they're trying to kill me. And like usually when you have a cutesy animal character with a cutesy voice, the protagonist's next move is usually not to successfully kill it. I thought for sure this thing was going to become an ally and I was going to save it. I'm like, nope, you have to kill it. Otherwise, you can't hurt the boss. And I was like, that's dark.
I don't see a problem with that. You're killing plenty of other people.
All right. I knew you wouldn't.
It's sentient.
They gave it a cute voice. That is code for this is going to be merchandise. Like,
I mean, at that point, that's really your own biases involved more than anything else.
all right. All right.
And I thought it was a cool battle.
Well, so what's weird about it though is that the perspective forces you to circle around it when you can have a direct straight on attack. Storytelling wise, you should take 2 steps forward and slash it. But the game's perspective is keeping you from do that. So I was like, that's not the best. But again, though, like with Gunstar, it feels like I'm kind of nitpicking. This is a really cool game, and I think the cons are not that big. Brad, is there something that grinds your gears about, or wax your bush, or whatever about? I can't tell if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah, the thing that whacks my bush the most is the sensitivity. I feel like it was way too slow. Like you're trying to aim around, and I don't know. I feel like I couldn't get from one side of the screen to the other. You can do like this dodge roll. I think that might help move it a little bit. I don't know if your movement is tied to the aim at all. but I don't know. I felt like I died or took damage in spots because if I sensitivity was up a little bit, I could be cleaning house. You're going left to right, smashing everything, but that was probably the biggest flaw to me. Other than that, most of it felt decently smooth.
Did you ever play the Wii sequel? Because that uses the nunchuck to move and free Wiimote aiming like a light gun shooter. And I feel like that probably works better.
That sounds really cool. No, I haven't played that one.
Yeah. Mike, you never played it, I'm assuming.
No.
Yeah. I want to now though. I think that with Switch 2, Nintendo Switch Online, if they keep doing this, we'll get Wii games because, with these two controllers, like you can emulate Wii pretty well.
I think there was also something that was frustrating. Again, this is a movement thing, and I think this is how it's handling it. And this happened to me more than once. Was the situation where, since one of the most important power ups that you'd get every so often was the health, at least for me, was you get this health power up to grab, and I had on more than one occasion, because it is effectively a rail shooter, where like it would drop, like, oh sweet, and then I would make a turn down a hallway and the health would stay put, and I was like, why did you put it there and then do that to me? Why do I have to pick up the health? Let me just get the health, make me pick up the points and make me earn those, but just give me the health.
I remember that moment. It felt mean-spirited because they dropped the health at the corner of the hallway.
Yeah.
And so because the camera zooms around, it's really disorienting to grab it as you run past. And of course you can't stop.
Yeah, because it's like you're on a straight line for it, and then the camera moves and you didn't count. And it happened to me somewhere else in the game the same way.
You had to know it was there.
Like that was a more than one time where I'm running through and it's like, oh, there's the health. And it's like, have me turn after that. Or let me just have it.
Well, Mike, we've all been running down a hallway and dropped something, and you just can't go back for it.
I don't run down hallways.
Anything else to say in criticism of the game before we go on to our rankings, boys?
Don't think so. Not for me.
All right. Well, that brings us to the moment of truth. We've covered the Joy Pros, the Joy Cons, and every bit in between. So now it's time to declare each game from today's episode as a NintenDo or a NintenDON'T. Let's start off with Gunstar Heroes on the Sega Genesis. Brad, what say ye?
It's definitely a Nintendo for me. What's your highest here? Nintendo 64? Is that what we go with?
That's right. Someone's a listener. Look at you.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it feels a little wrong calling it a Nintendo 64 for a Genesis game, but we'll still give it that.
Well, Mike tried to create the Mega-Do.
No, I did not.
Hey, look, if the people like it, the people like it. If it's a Mega-Do, it's a Mega-Do. I don't want to.
I didn't try to. No, I tried to come up with the Nintendo 64 DD.
Right. And then the Virtual Boy Do or something. Nintendo Virtual Boy. You're wacky, Mike. Gunstar Heroes is wacky. I think it's a Super Nintendo. This fills me with so much Sega pride because as a kid, I wish I had this game as a kid. I would have puffed up my chest a little bit more because you can't get this on Super Nintendo. The devs chose the Genesis because of its processing abilities with the number of enemies on screen. And it's just so imaginative, so colorful, so frenetic. The bosses are so dang weird. You got to play this game. Like, I think some people are debating if the expansion pack is worth it. And I think that people usually get the Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack for the Nintendo 64 games. But if you're sleeping on the Genesis app, this is one definitely worth checking out. I think most people are going to enjoy it. Mike, where do you land on Gunstar Heroes?
I think I'm probably a Nintendo. I kind of think like the one thing that I'm curious about now is how this would have been with the Genesis controller instead. Because 3 buttons does not map conveniently to a Switch controller. And I kind of only use 2 buttons for that reason.
Did you guys know that there's a 6-button Genesis controller for the Switch that's only in Japan? Like, I want that. That would have made Street Fighter playable, Mike.
They really need to just make those controllers easier to get if you want to promote this. Make the games that are on there that people want to play easy to play with those original controllers. And that is a perfect example of it.
I mean, the original controller should be in Target. You know what I mean? And you buy it and you get a month of Nintendo Switch Online. They'd make Nintendo. I know you're listening. One of our 8 listeners is a Nintendo executive. That one's for free, okay? Courtesy of the old switcheroo. Well, let's go on to Sin and Punishment. Brad, what's your verdict?
I give this one a standard Nintendo.
Okay.
We're not going to go too high on this one, but just the difficulty and the way that you get the game over and have to start back at the beginning. I mean, I think it's definitely worth playing. There's a lot going on here, and just to look at some of it's just wild. Oh yeah, I wanted to say the some of those characters. Do you guys ever watch Coraline?
Oh yeah, I love Coraline.
Yeah, I feel like they look like the other mother from from Coraline, like how weird and creepy they are. But yeah, this is a
Dude.
good game to play around like Halloween, I'd say.
Sin and Punishment as a stop motion movie would be pretty freaking cool.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, I think everything about Sin and Punishment, it's just so insanely unique. I know I said that about Gunstar, but Treasure, it's just kind of what they do. It's got this high concept sci-fi story. It's this roller coaster level design. It's really versatile and unique gameplay mechanics. I mean, just the way you hold the freaking controller. How many video games have you ever played that had you hold the controller in a different way? That's so unique, so creative. And it took inspiration from my favorite 90s anime and then went on to inspire some of my favorite video games from the aughts. Like Bayonetta is clearly inspired by Sin and Punishment. So just don't be put off by its nature as a rare import game. All the dialogue is in English, and I think the appeal of this game is almost universal. So it's a Super Nintendo. I really like Sin and Punishment. Mike, you gonna join us?
I think I'm gonna, with the caveat that do not expect to finish this game or see the end of it, and I don't think it's worth trying a second time. Honestly, I would say it is a Nintendo. It could be so much more if when you resumed, you would start off with those continues again, or if something like that. Like if I could pick up the momentum again.
I started using like a guide for some of those bosses because it was tough to figure out.
I never got to mention it, but Mike, the executives of Nintendo wanted this game to be easier. And at the end of the game, it gives you the original title, Glass Soldier, which is what they called this game before the difficulty was lowered. So there is an even more insane version, but it's kind of like exactly what you're saying. It's like the difficulty is just a bit too intense to be kind of a barrier between potential players and the joys that this game has. Well, guys, we're going to call that game over for today. The final scores are Gunstar Heroes and Sin and Punishment, both Nintendos. This episode might be the greatest advertisement for Nintendo Switch Online's expansion pack because it's Genesis and Nintendo 64, two games you just got to play. Brad, thank you so much for joining us. Before we go, why don't you tell our listeners where they can find you?
Pretty much on all social medias at Arcadiology. I mean, we're on most big podcast platforms. If there's something we're not on, let us know. We'll try to get on there. But yeah, come check out the podcast. I mean, we have a Discord server if you want to hop in there, talk to us, recommend some games. And I believe when this episode is out, we should be putting out our Ghosts and Goblins episode right after around Halloween. So that's what you got to look forward to.
Ooh, nice.
Those are games we're going to have to hit eventually. It's in the catalog.
Nice.
So we'll definitely be listening to your episode and getting some tips. All right. Well, that sounds excellent. Everyone, join us next time for our super retrospective season finale. Mike, can you believe it? 2 seasons already. That's crazy. We're giving our final thoughts on all 30 games from the last 15 episodes, which ones were superstars and which ones were Nintendo duds. We'll cover it all in our next episode, along with some fun bonus bits along the way. Everyone, don't forget to visit www.theoldswitcharu.com. There you can find links to our Spotify, Discord, YouTube, TikTok, and all the social medias you can shake a joystick at. You can even leave an old-timey voicemail, meaning we would literally love to hear from you. Big thanks to Crystal Fields for our incredible intro song, and thank you, dear listener, for liking, commenting, subscribing, and reviewing. This has been the Old Switcheroo, where we've been talking gaming retro with Mike and Jaymo.
I've been Mike.
And I've been Jaymo. Game on, everyone.
I have sent you the screenshot. Clearly, I understand this game even less than I thought I did.
Because it's legit. You beat me.
There's got to be a setting somewhere, because I'm pretty sure you hit more things and collected more things.
Did you get both bingos? I feel like those are worth a lot. There's like a rolling roulette wheel, and one of them targets a bingo. I only hit one.
I may have gotten both.
That's probably it. Well done.